In August, members of the Green Party of England and Wales will vote on a number of available positions within the party, including a new leadership team. I sat down recently with Ash Routh to chat about their campaign for the deputy leadership position. This is how it went. Welcome. I am delighted to be joined by Green Party Deputy Leadership hopeful Ash Routh, who, of course, is standing in the upcoming elections in August. Ash, welcome. Thank you so much for giving up some of your time to turn left. We do really appreciate it. How are you today? You well?
I'm really good. Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Fantastic. No, not at all. We really want to make sure that all of the candidates get an opportunity just to sort of get their views out there and to tell people a little bit more about them and what it is they're standing for. So, like I say, we're really grateful for you joining today. Just to start with, for people that don't know you. You were elected as a councillor at the age of 20, if my
Yeah,
notes are correct. You've been on the Standing Orders Committee for 3.5 years within the Green Party. And you're also a performing comedian as well.
I am. Yeah, I perform in a improv troupe called Side Quest.
Oh,
Uh,
brilliant.
we
So,
tour around the country.
so we'll come on to the Green Party stuff in a minute, but just tell us about Ash. Who are you? What are your interests? What do you do? And yeah, just let us into your life a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, aside from comedy, I'm a very avid LARPer. I go LARPing 4 weekends a year at least.
That's live action role play
And
for people that don't know.
yes, live action role play. So running around with foam swords and things like that. And I am a huge board gamer. I work at a board game cafe, so I'm a chef. Um, and yeah, that is a lot of what my hobby space is taken up by is gaming in one form or another. Um, Outside of that, I'm a sort of lifelong political activist. I've been working within the Green Party for about 15 years,
Hmm.
which feels like a very long time. I suppose it is. It's a good chunk of my life. Um, I've never been in any other political party. I've never really had any desire to leave. Um, and it's been quite amazing over those years to watch the Green Party grow from
Hmm.
what was a very small operation back in 2010, comparatively speaking, to this mass membership organisation now.
Hmm.
Um,
And you've been
I think
there
we need
sort
to
of.
adapt. Yeah,
I was just going to say, and you've been there sort of from the beginning of your political journey, have you?
absolutely, yeah. I was
Mm.
20 years old, so 2010 was my first general election. First time I got to cast a vote, I was got to cast a vote for myself, which was quite cool, quite interesting.
It's always odd when
uh,
that happens, isn't it? It happened to me in the local
yeah,
elections recently, and it was like, oh, that's a bit strange.
yeah, it was an odd little feeling, but quite a nice one.
Hmm. Cool. And just to talk a little bit more about the comedy. So, what sort of venues do you perform at? What sort of routines do you do?
Sure. Yeah, so SideQuest, we do a essentially an improvised fantasy movie over the course of either like an hour or 2 hours.
Okay.
So we take audience suggestions for quests, character names, motivations, skills, things like that. And then
Hmm.
as we all come on stage, we will grab from a pile of audience suggestions that are on like little character sheets. And those are the characters that we play, and we try and make a sort of rounded, completed narrative over the course of either an hour or 2 hours during the show. We go all over the place. We'll be at Edinburgh Fringe in August, as we were last year. I don't know when this is going out, but I'll be at Fantasy Forest this weekend, which may be before or after this goes out. But yeah, we travel all over the place. People like us, people come back and watch us do some more. If people are really interested, they can look up SideQuest Show on Instagram. But I'm not really to plug my show, but that is where it is.
No, it's good. It's a good opportunity to do. Why not? It sounds really interesting. It's interesting with the comedy because I'm trained as an actor, and
Yeah. I think certainly, at least within like comedy, quite a lot of like the best comedy is rooted in reality, I think. And so politicians and comedians quite often are looking at and seeing the same problems in the world. It's just that the comedian is trying to sort of poke fun at it and the politician is trying to fix it. But they're both utilizing kind of the same awareness a lot of the time. Um, so, I like that kind of commentary leaks into SideQuest quite a lot. I'm sure if the wrong commentator came and watched our show, they'd say it was very woke. Um, like, yeah, I think there's a strong connection there. With wider creatives, I don't know, but certainly with comedy, I think comedians and politicians are a lot closer than you might expect on the outset. Mm. Sure. So the person that you put in leadership, whether it's in co-leadership roles, one leadership, two deputies, whatever it is, they're going to sit on the national executive and they're going to be the face of the party. So you need to think about the people we want to be the face of the party, ideally going into the next general election. I appreciate we're technically only electing for a year, but really I think most people want to pick the leadership team going forwards for the next general. In the last general election, there was a perception of us as very, very middle class and very, very focused on the south. We didn't have a single seat that we were targeting north of Leicester. There are a lot of activists in the north, and the best we could do was get shipped down on a bus to go and work in one of the target constituencies that were what I would say in the south. Some people might argue Midlands for some of them, but um, I think it's really, really important. Absolutely. I think it's really important that at least one of our faces looking outwards is actually working class. And I don't mean somebody who is a representative of working class communities or used to be working class, both very valid and important voices, but I mean somebody who is actually working class, somebody who lives in a working class community, who knows what it is to live paycheck to paycheck, to rent rather than own, things like that. Also, I think it's really, really important that we have somebody who is gonna pull attention towards the north. We've got a lot of winnable seats, like right here where I am now, Sheffield Central, very winnable seat for us, Huddersfield, and there are other really good potential targets all over the north of England. I think it would be very, very helpful for us to have a member of the leadership team who's actually based here and is going to spend a lot of time here working on those kinds of seats. Um, on top of that, I think it's important to think about the leaders as being voting members of the national executive. The national executive do a lot of work and it is very hard work, but it is unpaid work, which means that often necessarily it's filled by people who can afford not to work as much. If you do more work on the national executive, you're going to have less time to work an actual job. And so it is a natural magnet towards more affluent, more well off people who can afford to work part time or to not work at all. This is a rare opportunity to put somebody on the national executive who wouldn't be able to do that. A working class person on the national executive is rare. And when we do have them, they're often extremely overstretched because having to work a full time job and then do their executive skills on top of that, which often equates to at least a part time job, depending on the time of year, where we are in the election cycle, things like that. Um, I think for me, I'm a working class person. I'm northern. I'm very confident and outgoing. I'll be good in debates. I know how to knock on doors. I've done it thousands and thousands of times. I would be somebody focused in the north, winning as northern seats, advocating on the executive for us to be more representative of working class voices and to keep the north in the loop and in the thought process about how we tackle the next general election.
And forgive me, am I right in saying that you're no longer sitting as a councillor as well? Is that correct? Or are you still?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
This would be my sole job would be deputy leader.
Okay. Cool. I asked that because obviously some of the candidates are currently elected councillors, and I've been
Yeah.
asking them, how they would balance both of those positions. So it's just interesting that you're in a situation where you wouldn't be balancing multiple roles. You would be able to just focus on your role as deputy leader. If you are elected,
Mhm.
one of two things will happen. Either Zach Polanski will win the leadership contest, and then you will be elected as a co-leader alongside somebody else, or Ellie and Adrian will win the co-ticket, and you'll be the sole deputy leader to their leadership. Um, if the former were to happen, and we were in a position where there was two deputy leaders, how would you balance working with your counterpart and ensuring that you were able to work together as a team despite any differences in ideology or policy that you may have?
I think that question sort of applies with leaders as well, because the deputy leader is having to work with the leaders. Um, for me, I've been kicking around for 15 years. I've seen a lot of policy disagreements. I've disagreed with a lot of my very close friends within the party. I stood to be chair of the party a couple of election cycles ago with Mel, and we both vociferously disagreed at the time about HS2. But ultimately, we were able to see the big picture. One thing I like to draw attention to is, it feels a bit like ancient history now, but the run up to the EU referendum, the Green Party was obviously very firmly positioned as a pro Remain party. But there were members of the party, and not an insignificant number of them, who wanted to vote Leave for various issues, for various reasons. And we didn't have a civil war. We didn't fall out. We all worked together. They agreed with the party on almost the entire policy platform, and we were all able to pull together and work together on those areas of agreement. I think that works with every issue. I don't think it matters what the disagreement is. We're a party. We're realistic about the fact that not everyone agrees on the same policies. I've always done that. I've always got out and campaigned with people I've disagreed with on almost any issue you can imagine. So I'd keep
And
doing that.
have you got any experience of sort of successful campaigns or any examples of times where that's happened, where you have disagreed with someone but you've had to work alongside them within the party, whether it's to get someone elected, whether it's to push through a policy, or
Yeah, no, absolutely. Elephant in the room, the whole like trans debate. I've actively canvassed for gender critical members in Sheffield. Um, when there was a quite a high profile suspension of the councillor, the candidate for Sheffield Central,
Mhm.
I approached her and I said that, political differences aside, as a representative of Green Park Regional Council, I was really happy to try and work with her to try and find a way to get the suspension lifted. Um, I've got a long history of reaching across the aisle on
Mhm.
various issues to try and help people out.
And how
Um,
important is that? Sorry to cut in, but I mean,
mm,
there's been a lot of debate within the party, particularly around issues of trans rights. And I mean,
mm,
there's a group of people within the party, that call themselves Greens in Exile. The people that have been suspended or that have left the party for differing reasons. Obviously, I don't expect you to
yeah.
speak on any individual case, but um, do you think there's a balance to be had in the party in terms of people's freedom of expression and people raising what they would argue are legitimate concerns around women's spaces? Or do you think the party needs to have a zero tolerance approach when it comes to transphobia and issues relating to that subject?
For me, I'm very happy to have any political debate about any issue, and I don't think there's anything too precious to do that. I think what is critical
Okay.
to me is that it's okay to bring an issue, for example, to conference, to have the party discuss, changing policy, changing direction, something that would sort of fundamentally change the party's philosophy a little bit on a
Mhm.
topic. Totally fine. That's a good thing to do, and that's healthy. What I think is unhealthy is when the party makes a position quite clear at conference. I don't think it's fair or reasonable to constantly relitigate that issue every single conference, whether that's every 6 months or every year, depending on how many conferences we have in a given year. I think it's unreasonable, and I think it's unfair to the members to
Mhm.
constantly ask them to relitigate these issues. We
So,
really
so it's,
should.
yeah. So I was going to say, so if elected,
mm,
then what would you do as deputy leader to try and um, calm that down a little bit?
I mean, I've always offered to sit down with anyone who wants to talk to me about these issues. I've done several sit downs. I've done some with Brent Greens. I've done some within Sheffield. Um, Always happy to do it. That would continue to be my position. I imagine if I was deputy leader, there'd probably be a little more interest and uptake rather than it just being, here's a random member who's happy to talk through these issues and talk about them. But that is the pattern that I would continue to follow. How I've worked as a member is how I'd work as deputy leader in that respect.
In an interview with Bright Green back in 2022, when he was standing for GPEX, the Green Party executive, for anyone who doesn't know, you claimed that the party, in your view, had been mismanaged.
Yes.
3 years on, do you still believe that the party is being mismanaged? And if so, what would you aim to do as deputy leader to resolve this?
Um, Absolutely. First of all, I think probably the fact that we lost a legal case did vindicate what I suggested back then. um, I think that the party is better managed now, but I know, having spoken to members on GPEX, that there is a um, prevailing position whenever there is a legal challenge to the party to seek to settle at all costs. And I think that is a little naive, and I would challenge that on GPEX. I think there are some cases where procedures haven't been followed where it makes total sense to try and settle. But I think that if your policy is to settle at all costs, then you are inviting more and more and more challenges as people are more likely to, for lack of a better phrase, chance their arm knowing that there's a settlement waiting on the other side. I think it's a really financially dangerous thing for the party to do. And also, I think that we've got a real problem where a lot of these cases are essentially people trying to settle some kind of interpersonal dispute. Often they're about complaints, which usually means there's a complainant and then there's a respondent. If one of those people has the financial resources to hire a lawyer and to threaten the party and the other person doesn't, and the result of that is the party settles, and therefore we've now got a two-tier complaint system where if you are wealthy enough to hire a lawyer, you're always going to win complaint because you could just threaten until you get what you want. So I would challenge this always settling policy. I think it's really dangerous.
And when you talk about mismanagement, just to clarify, you're not referring to a specific individual within the leadership team or within GPEX. You're talking about if I'm understanding correctly, you're talking about the general management from within those institutions within the party. So GPEX as a whole and the decisions that are made from the executive, which obviously includes people in positions of leadership. Is that right?
There's one specific example from the leadership team that I think is really dangerous. The leadership team have no direct involvement in disciplinary cases, and previous leaders, when asked to comment on disciplinary cases, have done the correct thing, which is to refuse to do so and to refer the questions to the appropriate body within the party. There is a member of our current leadership team who has breached that standard and has directly commented on disciplinary cases in which he had no understanding, no involvement, and therefore couldn't effectively give a qualified, fully researched comment. And I think it's caused quite a lot of harm to the party. I don't think that's appropriate. I wouldn't do it as a deputy leader, and I would challenge anyone in leadership who did that.
If you are elected and you're elected under the leadership of somebody who behaves in such a way that you think is inappropriate, how would you use your position to try and remedy that?
I would approach whoever had done it directly and make it very clear that I thought it was inappropriate for them to comment on disciplinary cases. Um, I wouldn't comment on disciplinary cases in response because then you'd be answering a wrong with a wrong. But I'd make it super clear to that member of the leadership team that I think it's inappropriate. And I'd also make it clear that if I'm then subsequently asked to comment on the disciplinary case that they have commented on, because they've sort of, they've opened the can, then my reply is always going to be, I think it would be inappropriate for a member of the leadership team to comment on disciplinary cases, because that is genuinely what I think. And that would ultimately be an act of criticism against their action, which I hope would be reason enough, if their common sense wasn't, to not do it, because they would be flat for that.
Okay. So moving on, back in April, current co-leader Adrian Ramsey, who's standing for re-election this time with Eddie Chowns, he took to Twitter to say that, like the BNP and UKIP, Reform, speaking about Reform UK, will disappear once voters realise what they really stand for. Do you agree with that statement?
No, and I think it was an incredibly naive thing for him to say. Reform are topping the polls, they're not going anywhere.
Okay, so with that in mind then, how do you think the Green Party need to move in order to tackle the rise of reform?
I think we need to recognise that populism is the relevant factor here. That is, the idea that the British public is generally tired of what they perceive as leadership by elites. And that has taken a lot of forms. I think Brexit was a big part of it. And I think that it has been seen as a very right wing thing. But actually, I think it has sort of pervaded society completely. And I
Mhm.
think elites means a lot of things. And I think it also means the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. And I think it's reflected in our polling. We saw in the last general election a lot of green reform swing voters. These were people who were looking for a radical alternative. The fact that Greens and Reform are night and day on policies, but are both in very different ways very radical alternatives, it
Mhm.
shows that a radical alternative is what was being sought over a specific radical alternative. And I think that since the general election, what Reform has done that the Green Party has failed to do is to grasp that and to take hold of it and to embrace it. I think we need to do the same thing. I think we need to be presenting a progressive, left wing populist vision for the country and
Mhm.
eco populism, as Zach has coined it, I think. Um, Rather than
Okay.
shying away from that idea, I think we talk down to the electorate a lot. I think we need to talk to the electorate at their level.
Talk to them. Yeah. Okay. Many people have brought up this question, and you actually talk in your campaign video for the deputy leadership race about the importance of messaging that cuts through to voters. So
Hmm.
this question was submitted by Leo on TikTok, but many other people have asked a similar question. And he asks, in an age where online communication is so integral, what is your aim for social media campaigns, and how will you achieve successful ones?
So first of all, I want to make clear I'm not criticizing the social media team who are woefully understaffed, and I think it is at the moment one person working extremely hard. And
Mhm.
so I'm not digging at that work, but I think that the direction that's been given has been fairly poor. We seem really, really shy as a party in how we communicate outwardly. Our comms are very dry, very
Mhm.
boring, very afraid to do anything even remotely antagonistic. I'll give a good example. Whenever there's a big royal story over the last 5 years, maybe, um, I would say that the Green Party's response to that news has been simpering. Very little comment about the fact that we are a proudly uh, Republican party, that we support the abolition of the monarchy. Whenever the
Mhm.
monarchy is, a major topic in the news, we've always been too shy to say that we oppose it. I think that's a massive mistake, and I don't think it's the biggest mistake in the world, but it is a massive mistake, and it's symbolic of how we communicate our policies in a
Mhm.
way that is mid and weak. I think we need to be a lot punchier. I think we need to be feistier. I think we need to, not just be putting up plain looking graphics, reiterating the same boring stuff again and again and again. I think often we feel like looking at the Green Party social media can feel like
Mhm.
looking through lecture slides rather than social media.
So on social media, and this isn't at all meant to be a gotcha, but I noticed that you don't appear to be on Twitter, TikTok, that I could see. Your Blue Sky
Yeah.
account has basically no posts on it, and you've not posted on Instagram since last year. To be completely honest with you, um, getting in contact with you was slightly trickier than it was for me to get in contact with some of the other candidates. So, with that in
Yeah.
mind, and with your social media presence, I mean, tell me if I've completely missed it and you're actually all over it, but I couldn't find it.
Yeah, that is
So,
cool.
so with that in mind, how can people that are voting in August, um, what sort of um, how can you convince us that you're the right person to maybe lead or certainly advise on social media policy when your own presence on social media seems to be quite small?
Absolutely, yeah. So I pulled away from Meta platforms and from Twitter when Elon Musk sort of turned it into a hub of fascism, if you will. Um, Certainly, as a trans person using that platform in the later period that I was using it, it was just getting worse and worse and worse. So I pulled away from those platforms, and I think I was right to do so. I'm not standing to be our external comms chief X officer. I'm standing to be our leader, and what I'm talking about is messaging, not social media strategy, which are similar but different things. I want to be engaging in debate, engaging on the doorstep. If I was standing to be external comms, I'd clearly be quite a poor candidate for it. I'm not standing to be external comms. I think our external comms have been weak, but I think the messaging in the external comms is the problem, not the external comms themselves, which is why it's very clear not to criticize the staff, who I know are very overworked. So yeah, I'm all about messaging, not about.
I think that's a completely fair answer. Completely fair. Right. So, well, speaking of social media, we've had some questions that have come in from people on social media. Um, Mick Coffee 2 on Twitter has asked, do you see the green agenda as essentially a socialist project or purely an ecological one?
It's definitely a socialist project. I've described it before as socialist in all but name. I think that if we're being very pragmatic about British politics, the Green Party wins votes across the political spectrum, and for whatever reason, call it a branding issue. There are a lot of people who will support socialist policies if they are just polled on policies, but if they're asked if they support socialism, they often say no. So I think the Green Party is very clearly socialist. I think if you look at our platform, it is a socialist platform, but we don't lead with the word socialism. I think socialists can smell socialism without being told it's there. And I think for whatever the reason this branding issue is, I don't think embracing the word actually helps.
Okay.
I think it's far more important to be socialist than describe yourself as socialist, because you can definitely do one without the other. So yeah, I do think we're a socialist.
I mean, there's lots of talk at the moment, isn't there, about a new left wing party potentially to be led by Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana. Some recent polling shows that a large group of Green voters would turn their backs on the party and would look at voting for this new party if it came about. And my understanding is that Zara Sultan has already had nearly 100,000 people sign up to the Action Network sign up that she put out on social media recently when she announced that she was resigning from the Labour Party. I suppose I'm really asking two questions in one. The first question is what do you think the Green Party should do moving forward to either work with or not with a new party on the left? But also, what do you think it says about the Green Party, or perhaps it may be just a comms or a messaging issue? But what do you think it says about the Green Party that nearly 100,000 people who are clearly, left wing in terms of politics haven't felt that they can find home in this party, but instead are holding on to something that as of yet doesn't even exist?
Sure. So I think first of all, it's worth noting that these polls that show a big chunk of the Green share, these are people who've been asked which parties they'd be likely to consider voting for. These aren't firm commitments. And frankly, I would imagine that if this party did exist, which it doesn't at the moment, if it did exist, I imagine more than half of Greens would consider voting for them, because I think it would be very likely that they'd have a very similar platform to us.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, at the minute, this party doesn't exist. I can't very easily comment on a party that doesn't exist, doesn't have any policies, doesn't have leaders. Um, I'm not. I'm not quite clear who would lead it, because Zara said that it would be her and Jeremy Corbyn, but then Jeremy Corbyn released a statement that seemed very non-committal to me,
Mm-hmm.
and there was some talk in the press about her having sort of started the race before the firing gun got shot. So I'm super not clear about
Mm-hmm.
whether this
But
party is
but
going to
what
come into
about
existence
and
or
I
whether the party.
I totally understand all that. But what about the other point then that do you think the Green Party have failed in a way, or do you think that there's something that they're not doing? Because there are a lot of people on the left the UK right now, who don't vote for the Green Party and who, for whatever reason, don't feel like they can. Um, so is that a failing on the Green Party's part? I mean,
I think there's a bit of an image problem. Yeah, I think I've seen people describe the Green Party as a very, very middle class party.
Mhm,
I think criticism from the left often looks like that. Um, I think that for the most part, people are vibe checking parties. They're thinking about the party, the image they see. They're not necessarily sitting and looking through our policy documents.
mhm,
They might not even be reading our last manifesto. I think we need to get people to stop and pause. I think when people stop and pause, that's the point where they're going to start looking at our policies, and the point at which people are looking at our policies, and the point where we're going to become increasingly popular. So I think we need to find a way to interrupt that thought pattern,
mhm.
which what I see is the Green Party is middle class and NIMBY. I think there have been some, since we got 4 MPs in the House of Commons, there have been NIMBYism stories rolling around. I think there's an interest now. We've got 4 MPs to try and
Do you think?
jam those attacks into the
Do you
party.
think those are fair criticisms, though, or do you think that those are just the media playing up to the old, this old image of what the Green Party maybe used to be?
I think it's a bit of both. I think there are examples of Green councillors opposing green infrastructure projects for very, very good reasons,
Hmm.
and there are examples of Green Party MPs opposing green infrastructure projects for maybe less good reasons. I think ultimately we need to think very carefully about if we are going to oppose a green infrastructure project for any reason, we need to be super, super clear, straight up front, ahead of the media,
Hmm.
why we're doing it,
Yeah.
because too much that's getting used against us. We're not explaining it, and it's being explained for us, and it's being explained for us in a way that is obviously very um, less true.
Yeah.
Um, I think, broadly speaking, we should avoid opposing infrastructure projects, but if we
Well,
have to do it, super clear about it.
on that, I've got a question from Danica Priest that was submitted via Twitter, and Danica's asked,
Mhm.
"How will you stand up to the property developers and YIMBY lobby and protect our green spaces and biodiversity?"
Absolutely. I think that so when I was a councillor, um, urban sprawl was kind of what I worked on. It was responsible housing development in rural Lincolnshire, and under the Localism Act, we had to get the consent of locals to pick where housing development would go. And what we often got from locals was, we don't want our village growing into that village and becoming a small town. And that was overridingly the priority of a lot of the people we spoke to. I think that principle is good. I think we should follow that principle. I think we should allow development to be directed by locals. I'm a big believer in devolution as much as possible. I think that these massive, sort of faceless housing developments that are being placed without much local consultation are really, really harming people's understanding and perception of house building. And we do need house building, but we can't we can't push ahead and build houses where people don't want them. I think there has to be a much greater degree of local
So,
consultation.
so how would you balance that with your previous answer then? Is it a case of finding the balance and opposing the infrastructure projects when there's a genuine reason to do so,
Mm,
which may include the destruction of the green spaces or the biodiversity in the area that they're looking at building infrastructure, but also sort of still recognizing the importance of those infrastructure projects and maybe, I don't know, offering a
sure.
solution, or an alternative.
So when I talk about infrastructure projects, I'm talking about things like railway lines, power lines, things like that. In terms of housing, I'd like us to see more density in urban areas.
Hmm.
They're way, way, way more ecologically sound and responsible, and they reduce commutes as well. And there are a lot of people who would rather walk to work than commute to work, even if it's on public transport.
Yeah.
I think population density in urban areas is a big part of the puzzle for doing that. I think we should be advocating for that. We've got a lot of Greens in urban seats who can do that.
Hmm.
Um, so I'd like to see that. The only way you can
Cool.
protect the countryside is have the urban areas be more dense. It's one or the other, essentially.
Okay. I am aware of time, so I'm going to wrap up in a moment. Just before we do, oh well, let's throw let's throw two in. What do you think the purpose is of the local Green parties, and how would you work at a grassroots level?
I think local Green parties, I was talking about devolution a moment ago, I think it's absolutely essential. Um, I think that the way the National Green Party works right now, it is very Southern focused. It is very middle class focused for reasons I've already sort of gone into.
Mm-hmm.
Local Green parties are what the party needs in order to make sure that we have got a finger on the pulse on the ground. Specific local issues. It's why it's so important to have, at least one Green councillor on a council, that person who is there on the ground, who is seeing the debates, who can appraise people of what's going on. I think it's absolutely essential.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we should be protecting local parties. I do not like that the National Party is trying to, in my opinion, gaslight local parties into accepting the theft of their capitations. The capitations, that's the money that's paid to local parties based on the amount of members they have,
Mm-hmm.
were taken away, and then local parties were asked to donate a portion of their owed capitations back. I don't like that. I don't like it at all. I think it was a way to effectively ask the local parties to forego a debt that was owed to them in order to help the party. It's not even a real donation, it's just money that's being written off, essentially.
Okay.
And there is a motion coming to conference that's going to pretty dramatically affect capitations for local parties.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the executive did a very good job of explaining why they want to do that and justifying it. I hope they do a better job at conference, because I think it's going to make a lot of local parties unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the way local parties are treated in the party.
Okay.
I think we can do a
So
lot
do
better
you
on
want
that
to
front.
see an improvement of that? And in terms of your relationship as deputy leader, would I mean, Zach, as the current deputy leader, has spent a lot of his time traveling around the country, meeting different local, well, not just local Green parties, but also just lots of different local communities. Is that something that you would aim to continue if elected?
Absolutely. I'd like to follow what I think I'm okay calling the Zach model. The only thing I'd like to do a little differently is I've seen visits from deputies and from leaders, and often they're flying visits.
Hmm.
A morning or an afternoon, sometimes even less than that, a photo opportunity, then they've got to go on to the next location. And I
Yeah.
totally understand why. There's a lot of country to get around and not that many people on the leadership team.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's going to stand me in good stead is, as a deputy leader, I would consider that my full-time job.
Hmm.
I would like to spend some time going around the country and spending a day with a local party rather than a flying visit of an hour or two.
Hmm.
And
And
I
like,
have to be able to do that. I
yeah, and
wouldn't have
and
to get
as
back to London for any.
as we've already talked about, because you've not got those council commitments, and you've still got the experience because you have served as a councillor, but because you're no longer in that position, then obviously that wouldn't be the case. So you would be free to go on and do that. Um, I appreciate that party policy is set by the members. But if
Mm.
you could change one element of party policy, either get rid of something, replace it with something new, or maybe tweak something, um, what would it be and why?
HS2. I think that becoming a pro HS2 party after HS2 was cancelled was a ridiculous position,
Okay.
personally. I think that it is really, really important that we get green infrastructure projects
Hmm.
built. I think even the most pro HS2 people would agree it took too long, it was over budget, it was badly managed, it destroyed areas that didn't need to be destroyed. I've never heard anyone disagree with that suggestion, even the most die-hard pro HS2 people.
Yeah.
I think for the Green Party, our endorsement is the gold standard for any green infrastructure project. If the Green Party endorse it,
Hmm.
then it's never going to get any greener than that. No developer is ever going to go, the Green Party's endorsers, how can we make it greener? That would be a strange thing to do. And so I
Mm.
think we should treat our endorsement as a gold standard.
Yeah.
And HS2 was not a gold standard green infrastructure project.
No.
Therefore, I don't think it was beneficial. I think what we have effectively done is lowered the standard for what is considered a green infrastructure project.
Hmm.
And I think that's bad for green infrastructure projects going
Okay.
forward.
And I
And the
think,
benefit of it, I don't know, because it's not going to get built. So, like, you know.
No, I think
What was
that's
the
a fair.
point?
I think that's a fair answer. I remember I interviewed with Turn Left's Natalie Bennett immediately after that vote was made at a party conference on HS2, and to say that she gave a very honest answer would probably be an understatement. So yeah, I'm sure you. Well, I know that you're not alone in the party on that, and it was quite a with it being quite a split vote. What would you do just before we wrap up on that point? Because
Mm.
actually, I was in the room when that vote took place, and it was almost 50-50. You had one
It
half
was
of the
razor thin. I was there
like
counting the votes. It was razor thin.
so. How would you, not just on that issue, because I think there's many other issues within the party where I also think there's a split almost down the middle. Um, how would you unite the party as deputy leader? How would you unite those two opposing sides where there are some disagreements on some quite important policy issues? Where it is that razor thin. How would you bring those two halves of the party together to say, actually, we need to work together as one in order to move forward as a party?
I mean, I think in HS2 specifically, it's almost an easier task than any other policy area because ultimately it's a dead project with or without Green Party support.
Hmm.
And so I think realistically now Greens, pro HS2 and anti HS2 Greens can come together. We can have
Hmm.
a frank conversation about the project. We can have a frank conversation about the failures of the project and the
So
successes of the
Other,
project.
other issues then, so say
Mm.
nuclear, for example, and nuclear weapons and nuclear power. There's a bit of a divide
Yeah.
on that. We've seen it in terms of the accusations of NIMBYism, where there are many people in the party that want to see green spaces protected at all costs. Other people that would rather see some infrastructure and more housing and other developments on those areas. Um, I mean, there's some more sort of contentious and controversial ones, but um, issues like that, and just the wider divide that come with those, how would you bring people together um,
I think
towards
it's
a?
I think it's important. Yeah, I think it's important for the party to be able to unify behind a decision, even when it's a tight one.
Mhm,
Um, I'm not seeking to overturn the HS2 decision or indeed any other. Um, the party has disagreed with me at various points in my time in the party and even
mhm,
now. And for me, I understand it's a big picture thing. It's the Green Party, it's not my party. It doesn't have to represent me on every issue. I just have to be, you know, up upfront about my disagreements with the party when they're relevant. But actually, I think it's a healthy thing. I think it'd be a good thing to have, for example, the leadership team and our MPs represent the diversity of the Green Party's thought. For example, the
mhm,
assisted dying bill, all four of our Green MPs voted in favour. And in a way, that's fine. I'm sure they all individually agreed with it. But there's a lot of consternation. There's a lot of people seriously concerned about it. I'm one of them.
yeah.
I think knowing how divided the party was on that, maybe in a way it would have made sense if at least one of them could have tried to champion the other position
Mhm,
um, within Parliament. I think as we get more MPs, it's going to be really, really important for us to represent our diversity of thought.
mhm,
We often pull together on the same issues, on the environmental issues, but where we don't, I think that whether it's leadership, whether it's MPs, whether it's councillors, I think representing that diversity of thought is a good thing. I think even
yeah.
if people are voting together one way, I think they should make clear that they understand all the positions. I'd like to
Mhm.
see more of that. I'd like to see more of
And
all sides being represented.
And I suppose not having a party whip is great in some senses because it would allow for exactly what you're talking about. It would allow for those other views to be represented. But then when we've only got a handful of MPs in Parliament, it does make it really difficult if they all agree on something that the rest that many others in the party may be divided on. It's weighing up that balance, isn't it, for the MPs of, well, do they represent their constituents? Do they represent their
Mm.
own beliefs and views, or do they represent the party that they're in a position to lead? In the case of Carla and Adrian at the moment, I suppose, as leaders of the party, whilst also being MPs. So Yeah, it's an interesting one. Listen, Ash, I could talk to you for hours. I'm sure there's so much more that we could discuss and talk about, but I am going to have to call it there, just for time. If people are watching this and they might want to, learn even more about you, or if they've heard something that they like and they want to go dig in a bit more, or equally, if they've heard something maybe they don't like and they want to just double check, where do people find you? How do they hear about your campaign? And where can they
Absolutely.
sort of keep up to date with your campaign in this election?
So all of my campaign news will be up at ashrouth.com. There's also contact details on there, so people are very free to email me directly. I always like it when people do that. I love
Mm.
writing responses to people. So yeah, ashrouth.com is the place to go for all news about my campaign and to have a chat with me about anything.
Marvelous. Well, Ash, thank you so much for giving up your time for Turn Left today. We do really appreciate it. All the best with the campaign. Break a leg, and we might speak to you at the other end. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Cheers.